G'day, welcome to Bradley's Bakehouse, where today we're going to take the same white bread recipe that we made our really simple no equipment loaf out of last week, and we're going to sort of alter the way that we put the ingredients together, and we're going to end up with something a little bit more special. This is how you make your first ever baguette. Let's get to it. Like I said, we're going to be using the exact same ingredients as last time, exact same quantities, we're just going to put them together in a little bit of a different order. So we've got our same 12.5% protein bread flour, we've got water, we've got instant yeast, we've got a little bit of diastatic malt. Check to see if your bread flour contains malted barley flour as an ingredient. You might not need to add this if it does. The diastatic malt's just going to promote a little bit of enzymatic activity. It's going to help brown the crust, and it's going to help give the yeast a more consistent food source. It's going to use the process of amylase to convert some starches into sugars so the yeast can feed on it. This is very commonly added to flour in the US and Canada. It's not really a common thing here in Australia. You can get diastatic malt. It's pretty easy to get. You do need to go to a specialist store, but it lasts forever and it's pretty cheap, all things considered. So having a container of that in the fridge is always good if you want to get into bread making and stuff like that. And we've also got salt. This is just plain regular sea salt. If you can't source the diastatic malt, it is optional. Don't worry too much about it. You can still make really, really good bread without it. It's just you might not end up with something that's going to end up exactly like mine does. And that's totally fine. Make the bread that you can make. Making some bread's better than making no bread. I'm filming this in one of the 3 cold weeks of the year that Queensland gets, so we're using quite warm water. We're aiming for a finished dough temperature of about 26 to 30 degrees. That's the sweet spot that yeast likes to operate in. 9 months of the year, I use fridge cold water because it's usually around 28 to 30 degrees ambient in my kitchen anyway. This is just one of the times where I'm using warmer water to compensate. It's probably about 21, 22 degrees in the kitchen right now, so the temperature in your kitchen is below that, use warm water. If it's above that or close to that, use cold water. One of the things with making a really small amount of dough like this is it's really quickly going to equalize in temperature with its surroundings, so we want to sort of get that temperature right early on. What separates this recipe from the last one that we made is that we're going to take a portion of our ingredients and ferment them ahead of time to develop a heap of extra flavor and give it a little bit more of like a fancy texture. This particular technique is called pate fermente, right? Or old dough, as it's sometimes referred to. It's fallen a little bit out of fashion in contrast to the other sort of big pre-ferments, which would be Polish and Biga. But I think for the home baker, pate fermente is really, I think, the way to go, because if you know how to make dough, you know how to make pate fermente. You just need to make a little bit of it ahead of time. Because we're going to be pre-fermenting half of our dough, it makes this recipe really simple. We're going to take our quantities and we're just going to divide them exactly in half. We're going to mix half of our dough today and we're going to let it rest, relax, and ferment in the fridge overnight, and then we're going to add it to a fresh portion of our dough that we mix tomorrow. So let's go ahead and get our pre-ferment mixed. We'll start by mixing our flour, yeast, and malt together, making sure that we hold back the salt. In goes our water, and we'll form a shaggy mass so we can let a 20-minute fermenter release take care of some of our gluten development. This is going to make kneading way easier a little bit down the line. After a 20-minute rest, our dough's picked up some nice stretch, so we're going to add in our salt and give it a good 3 or so minutes of kneading. The goal of kneading is to stack and form up strands of gluten to form a net that's going to capture the gas that's produced by our yeast. So you want to settle into a nice rhythm of pushing the dough out with the palm of your hand, folding it over itself, and repeating. After about 3 minutes, our dough is nice and supple. It's tacky, but it's not sticky, and it's forming a smooth skin when you boule it up. It's ready to settle in for its first fermentation. I'm going to pour a drop of oil into a container to prevent any stickage, and then plop my dough inside. Like I said, it's pretty cold today, so our dough's sitting around 21, 22 degrees. We're going to use the same trick that we did last time with our oven. We're going to run it for about 2 minutes and then shut it off, wrap our container in a tea towel, and place it in there. After 10 minutes, it's sitting nicely at about 28 degrees, which is perfect. After an hour or so, our dough is nice and puffy, but not quite doubled in size. We're going to degas it, roll it up, put it back in its container, and then it's going in the fridge overnight to develop a deep, rich, fermented flavor. Pate fermente, or the old dough technique, originates from bakers taking a piece of leftover dough from one day's batch, throwing it in the fridge overnight, and then incorporating it into the next day's batch. The dough develops a really strong flavor overnight, and the cold fermentation imparts a really unique texture to the finished crust. It'll end up really like crusty, for lack of a better word. It's the kind of thing that can only be achieved with like a longer, slower fermentation. It also had the added benefit of cutting down on waste. The next day, we've pulled our dough out of the fridge about an hour before we're mixing to let it come a little bit closer to room temperature. As you can see, it's puffed up nicely and has a little bit of a beery but like quite rich and complicated aroma. That's that fermentation going to work. This is going to be a really good shot of flavor into our dough. We're now going to mix the exact same batch of dough again using the exact same procedure as we did yesterday. Exact same ingredients and holding back the salt for our 20-minute ferment release. After that 20 minutes is up, we'll add our salt and tear our lovely pate fermente into small pieces to make it easier to incorporate. We'll settle in for another 3 minutes of kneading until our dough is nice and smooth, tacky but not sticky, and can form a lovely smooth skin when it's bulled up. We're going to bulk ferment this dough for about an hour and a half all up. After its first 30 minutes, we're going to perform what's called a stretch and fold. This is going to help lend structure to the dough as well as redistributing the yeast's food supply so it can continue to feed nice and vigorously. Pick a side of the dough and with a wet hand, grab it and stretch it as far as you can before it rips and then lay it back over itself. Rotate the bowl 180 degrees and then repeat, then rotate the bowl 90 degrees and repeat twice so the dough has been stretched and folded 4 times. Flip the dough over so the top is smooth again and leave it back in its container for its remaining hour of fermentation. Remember that the times that I'm giving you are only appropriate for when the dough is sitting within that 26 to 30 degree temperature range. If it's a little bit colder where you are, it might need a little bit longer. If it's a little bit warmer where you are, it might need a little bit less. We're looking for the dough to roughly double in size. It might not quite get there and it might go a little bit further, but it's gonna be very light and it's gonna be very voluminous. That's what we're shooting for with this bulk fermentation. Temperature is one of the most important variables when it comes to fermentation and it comes to bread baking. Cold and warm fermentation both impart different flavor and textural qualities. This recipe, which is based a little bit on the pain de campagne recipe from Peter Reinhardt's The Bread Baker's Apprentice, marries the two techniques together and gives you a little bit of the best of both worlds. After our bulk fermentation is completed, we're going to turn our dough out into a lightly floured surface and divide it in half. Like our mantra from last week that Chad Robertson cites in Tartine, dough is dough. This is the stage that you get to decide what you're turning your dough into in its final form. You could turn it into a single loaf, you could turn it into pizza, you could turn it into flatbreads or rolls, or you could do what we are doing here, which we're going to cut it into equal portions and make 2 home-style baguettes. We're going to loosely pre-shape each cut of dough by pulling each point towards the center and rolling it into a boule to let that gluten that we've just really pissed off relax. I tend to pre-shape everything into boules, even if it's going to end up as like a loaf or a log or whatever. That's just a form of habit. I know plenty of bakers who will pre-shape accordingly. I have found that pre-shaping everything into boules works well enough for me. This is one of those things where it's up to you to find what's best for you. I could show you a dozen different shaping methods, but until you find the one that works really well for you, you're just gonna have to experiment. The stakes really aren't that high. Don't overthink it. A home oven isn't really suited to making like a proper traditional Parisian baguette, but we can still make something that's going to scratch the same itch and fulfill the same purpose. I like to think of shaping baguettes the same way that we shaped our batard in the last video, just like a little bit longer. That sounds like I'm really dumbing it down and it sounds really simple, but I've been doing that for the last 3 years and no one's told me to fuck off so far. We're going to gently flatten our dough out to disperse any super large bubbles and get them into a sort of thick disc. Then we're going to take the furthest edge and fold it into itself and with a bit of force really seal that seam. Then, with our hands forming a very sort of wide-angle triangle, we're going to roll the dough up to form a thick torpedo shape. From here, it's just a matter of working it to the length and aesthetic form that we want. Baguettes generally have a pointed edge, so we'll apply a little bit more pressure as we work towards the edges. When the dough gets to about this stage, I like to start the other one and let the first one rest before rolling it out a little bit longer and more uniformly. Even a couple of minutes of resting can make this dough more compliant. Definitely don't force it. If it's not going to stretch the way that you want it to, just let it rest. If you fight the dough, it's probably going to win in the form of it ripping and really fucking ruining your day. We're going to set these 2 demi-baguettes onto a lined baking tray and dust them with a little flour before covering them with a clean tea towel to prevent them from drying out while they go through their final proof. This is a really good time to preheat your oven and get it ready for hearth baking. Optimum results would call for a baking steel or a baking stone, but they can be pretty expensive, and in the spirit of doing this without specialty equipment, I'm not going to use mine today. The point of these videos is to demonstrate that you can make really good bread with very little equipment. One thing that we are going to do is prep our oven for a steam injection. Steam is a super important part of the bread baking process. Starting the bake in a really nice humid environment keeps the crust gelatinous, which means the yeast can push out and rise as much as it can without the crust ripping. I put a cast iron skillet with some stainless steel chain links on the floor of the oven that's going to preheat alongside it. I'm cranking my oven to its maximum temperature, which is about 240 degrees. You'll see why shortly. After about 45 minutes, our baguettes are nice and puffy. They're ready to be scored and baked. Traditionally, a bread lame or a bread lame, the internet can't decide on how to pronounce it, would be used for this task. But they can be pretty expensive, and again, we're doing like a no equipment thing here, so I'm just using a regular serrated steak knife. Using that steak knife, I'm gonna make 3 quick, clean, and deliberate cuts down the surface of our dough. We score bread to control the expansion that occurs when the bread hits the oven. If we were to not score it, what would happen is a buildup of gas and a buildup of pressure would find the dough's weakest point and it would just rupture out of the side. That can be a really cool and a really pretty thing if that's what you're going for. That's not what we're going for today though. Also, the scores look really cool. Throw a few ice cubes in the bottom of the oven to get a little bit of humidity going before we load the product in. When we hear the ice stop sizzling, we're going to open our oven door, we're going to load our product inside, then we're going to cover our oven door with a tea towel, and we're going to pour about a cup's worth of boiling water into that preheated cast iron skillet. It's going to make a pretty tremendous billow of steam, so then we're going to pull our tea towel away and quickly shut and seal seal the oven. This is your obligatory, don't forget the tea towel thing. I've said it before and I've said it again. If you get enough water onto the oven door, the glass can shatter. Don't fucking do it. Just put the tea towel down. We're gonna let these bake with our oven still on max temperature for about 10 minutes. All the stuff that we've done has just sapped a ton of the heat, so we really need it to recover and get it back up to that high level of heat. And then we're gonna turn our oven down to about 220 and we're gonna bake these for about another 20 minutes. You'll know when they're done when you've got a really rich, golden, almost like reddish brown crust. These are sprung nice and tall. I'm really happy with how these look. There's a little bit of burnishing from that flour that we applied before. We need to get these cooling on a wire rack as soon as they come out of the oven. You do not want these to sit on a flat surface. If they start to sweat, it'll really, really mess with the texture of the bread and it'll really, really hamper its shelf life. Get them cooling on a wire rack ASAP. If you're planning on eating these now with like a hot meal and it's like ready to go ahead and tear into them. Hot bread is delicious. I'm not gonna deny you that. But if you are planning on keeping these and maybe stretching them over multiple meals or whatever, or just for having like bread in the house, let them cool fully before you slice into it. Cutting into hot bread, like letting it steam, will really, really fuck with the shelf life. Just be patient, give it a good hour on a wire rack, let it cool properly. The pate fermente has given these baguettes a little bit more of an open crumb than last week's bread. It's not gonna be crazy, proper, insane open baguette wizardry, but that's got more to do with the hydration than anything. If you do want to increase the hydration in this recipe to get a more open crumb, like go ahead, I'm not going to stop you. You probably will get one. I've done this with up to 68 or so % hydration, and I've had quite nice open crumbs, but these are beginner videos. This is bread that I want you to be able to shape without getting pissed off and throwing in the towel and having the whole experience ruined for you. So these are at around 63% hydration for all of the nerds. The bread will have a nice, rich, like more bready aroma. This will smell more like bread than bread does. That's just kind of the magic of pre-ferments. And if you listen really closely, oh, you know that scene in Ratatouille? Ah! That gets me. I love that. Beautiful, crispy, crisp crust, right? And that's crispy even when this is like stone cold, right? Which the other bread didn't do it. It's softened up by now. That's one of the added benefits of pate fermente. Issa Nehemiah Brown, in his book, A Book About Bread, talks about the virtues of pre-fermented flour and how it can increase shelf life and stuff like that. It's like a really well-documented thing that goes all the way back to like the taste of bread. A great added benefit of this is that whereas our other bread would last a day or two at the max before staling and getting weird, these will last a good 3 or so days and you could still toast these like 5 days or so after you've baked them. This is a great weekly loaf recipe. If you were to turn this into like a week's bread, you know, we only have 2 people living here and we usually go through a loaf of bread a week. Something like this is generally what I'll make for us. I really want to emphasize that this is the same recipe as last week. We just rearranged a few things. I love Polish and I love Biga, and I love working with those kind of pre-ferments, but I really think for the home baker, in particular the home baker who's maybe just getting to grips with things, I really think pate fermente is the way to go. If you know how to make dough, you know how to make pate fermente. It works with just about any recipe. It starts getting a bit sketchy when you get towards enriched recipes that have like eggs and butter and like stuff that can spoil in it, but I really think pate fermente is the way to go if you want to broaden your repertoire and your skill set beyond just making direct doughs. These aren't traditional baguettes by a long stretch. I fucking know what a traditional baguette is. Stop writing that comment. 30 centimeters, 7 scores, fuck off. I know what it is. In a home environment though, this is a really bloody good loaf of bread that anyone would be happy to eat. And if they tell you that they're not happy to eat it, fuck them. Get them out of your house. I made these without any specialty equipment. One surefire way that you could sort of up the quality and make them more like what you get at a commercial bakery would be incorporating a baking stone or a baking steel. That initial heat pumping straight into the bottom of them will give you oven spring that you just kind of can't get baking on a tray in an oven like this. My baking steel was quite expensive. It's a fancy one, but it's really not necessary to get really good bread like this. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope you got something out of it. Just by rearranging some things and fermenting some stuff ahead of time, you can really end up with quite a different product. It's a bit like that scene in Full Metal Alchemist where he's like, the hardness of carbon depends on how the atoms are arranged, and then he like messes with that guy's shield.
What the fuck are you talking about?
Subscribe if that's a thing that you feel like doing. There might be more niche references later.